In the 11th year of our marriage, Ethan was lying on our bed with his childhood sweetheart. After I woke him up, he was extremely impatient. I was drunk. Nothing happened. If anything was going to happen between us, it would have happened long ago. What's it got to do with you? I replied, it doesn't matter. In the past, I would surely have gone hysterical, questioned him frantically until he made a promise and made everyone unhappy. But this time, I really seemed not to care anymore. I stood silently at the door, looking at Ethan and Sophia lying on my bed under the same quilt. In the living room, my mother-in-law was sitting on the sofa cracking melon seeds, yet her eyes were glancing over here with a gloating look. I knew she did it on purpose. She was waiting for me to lose my temper, to make a big scene, and for me to completely fall out with my husband Ethan. Ethan and I fell in love freely, and it had been 11 years since we got married. After marriage, we also had a very sweet period. However, in recent years, we had been quarreling more and more frequently, almost having a small quarrel every 3 days and a big one every 5 days. And most of the time, it was because of his childhood sweetheart Sophia. It seemed that they would never learn to keep an appropriate distance from each other. My mother-in-law was quite happy to see this happen. In recent years, she had often been saying that Sophia was the daughter-in-law she had always dreamed of, and she even helped create opportunities for Sophia to be with Ethan. At first, Ethan would directly oppose what my mother-in-law did. Because of this, Ethan and I quarreled, and most of the time, he was the first to apologize and promise to be more careful in the future. Out of love, I believed him. However, the next time, it would still be the same, repeating over and over again. Gradually, he lost his patience. His explanations began to be perfunctory, and he even roared at me impatiently, asking me to be more rational. But whenever this happened, I couldn't be rational at all. As long as I thought that something might have happened between him and Sophia, I couldn't control my emotions and would make a big fuss like a madwoman. Our feelings also faded away in the quarrels time and time again. I knew that our relationship was getting more and more distant. I also knew that my mother-in-law did it on purpose, just trying to drive me crazy. But this time, I didn't do as they wished. I stood at the door looking for a while, then walked forward and calmly woke Ethan up. Can't you just let me sleep a little longer? Do you know how tired I am from work and socializing? He looked a bit impatient but froze when he caught sight of Sophia lying beside him. However, that daze only lasted for a moment. Then he explained casually, if that could be called an explanation, I had lunch with Sophia's father and the others at noon and drank a lot of wine. Sophia must have gone into the wrong room. Nothing happened between us. Oh, I didn't say anything and turned around to pick up the vegetables that had fallen at the door. What's the meaning of this? Are you giving me the cold shoulder again? Ethan became even angrier. I've already said that there's nothing between Sophia and me. There's just a brother-sister bond between us. Can't you stop giving me the cold shoulder just because of this? You also know that we grew up together. If there had been anything between us, we would have been together long ago, and it wouldn't have been your turn at all. It was the same old cliché. Every time I caught him being intimate with Sophia, Ethan would say these same things over and over again. It was as if I was really being unreasonable. At first, I also reflected on myself, wondering if I was really too sensitive. I told myself to be magnanimous, and when I felt uncomfortable, I only dared to hide in my room and shed tears aggrievedly. But gradually, they went too far. Today, they even slept on my bed as if there was nobody else around. Time after time of tolerance didn't bring a better result. Hearing a similar explanation again, I felt nothing but endless annoyance in my heart. I picked up the vegetables and turned around to ask him calmly, then can you tell me why she's already 28 years old but still not married and keeps hovering around you, a man who has a wife and children? Doesn't she have her own home, her own life? I? He opened and closed his mouth, speechless. I looked at him silently and smiled sarcastically. Perhaps stimulated by my smile or maybe speaking his mind, he subconsciously raised his voice and roared, what do you know? Sophia is different from you. Daughters from good families don't have to worry about getting married. Sophia's father and mother love her very much. They won't easily marry her off like a commodity. They will consider a lot of things when choosing a partner for Sophia. And Sophia herself has the capital to choose slowly. She has an excellent education, an outstanding family background, broad horizons, and doting parents. She doesn't have to rush to get married. She can do whatever she wants. Besides, most people in our circle get married late. There are plenty of people who aren't married even in their early 30s. Only people from the countryside. As he was speaking, he suddenly realized something and was like a choked duck. Only I, a girl from the countryside, don't have the right to choose and can only attach myself to you without dignity. Even when my own husband is lying on the same bed with another woman, I don't have the right to say anything, right? I took up his words and continued to ask. Although I had told myself to stay calm long ago, my heart still unavoidably ached when I heard Ethan say that. I had always thought that Ethan was different from the others in the family, that he understood me. But it turned out that I had thought too much. Sophia and I were indeed different. She was a young lady from an excellent family background and graduated from a prestigious university, while I was just a girl who escaped from a small mountain village, didn't even go to college, and was almost sold by my parents to exchange for betrothal gifts for my younger brother. I had always known that Sophia and I were different, but Ethan had never looked down on me. I thought that was his way of caring for and respecting me. But I didn't know that he had always thought of me like that all along. Not anymore. I wiped away my tears, took a glance at Sophia who was pretending to be asleep on the bed, and rushed out of the door. Evelyn, that's not what I meant. Ethan subconsciously took a few steps forward. But soon, there came a loud bang of the door closing behind me, along with my mother-in-law's angry dissuasion, "Don't go. If she has the guts to run away from home, then she should have the guts not to come back." Then, it became quiet behind me. I wasn't surprised. Ethan had always seemed to listen to his mother. All the neighbors said that he was a filial person. Undoubtedly, Ethan liked me. But once this affection conflicted with his filial piety, I was the one who could be put aside. Walking aimlessly on the street, I didn't know where to go. In the first year of our marriage, after I got pregnant with Julian, I quit my job at my mother-in-law's strong request. In Ethan's family, since then, all the trivial household chores had fallen on me. A year later, I gave birth to Julian. After finishing my maternity leave, I was ready to look for a job again. But my mother-in-law said that Julian was too young to be away from me and that they had already gotten used to the meals I cooked. And so, I had been a housewife for 11 whole years. From the moment I opened my eyes in the morning until I went to bed at night, I was always busy. However, my mother-in-law always thought that I had an easy life and that Ethan was wronged by being with me. Whenever I had a conflict with my mother-in-law, Ethan always advised me to give in to her, saying that it hadn't been easy for his mother to give birth to and raise him. Gradually, I gave in to everyone in the family, but I forgot about myself. Even every time we quarreled, I only dared to cry in my room when there was no one around, and that was only after I had finished all the chores. I tried my best to be understanding towards everyone in the family, but no one understood me. Just because Ethan mentioned last night that he wanted to eat fresh wild fish, I got up early this morning. I took the bus and went to a suburban farm dozens of miles away to buy it. But when I came back, what awaited me were my husband's betrayal and my mother-in-law's gloating eyes. After having wronged myself for so long, this time, I didn't want to consider anyone else anymore. I wanted to be a bit willful. I ignored Ethan's phone calls, turned off my mobile phone directly, and took the bus to a nearby cinema. A movie adapted from a novel that I liked very much was released a while ago. I had wanted to watch it for a long time. I had also mentioned it to Ethan before. When I was talking about it, my mother-in-law heard it and said that we were an old married couple and there was no need to be so fussy. At that time, Ethan comforted me behind his mother's back and said that he would take me to watch it when he was free. I was quite happy at that time. But he was always so busy that even though the movie had been released for over a month, he still hadn't had time to accompany me to watch it. Now that I thought about it, the last time I watched a movie with Ethan was actually 6 years ago. Later, every appointment we made seemed to be put on hold for various reasons. Following the bus route, it took less than half an hour to reach the cinema. Only then did I realize that the cinema was so close to home and that watching a movie wasn't such a troublesome thing. Unfortunately, the movie I wanted to watch had already been taken off the screen. It would have been great if you had come 2 days earlier. It was taken off the screen this Monday. The ticket seller looked rather regretful. I stood there, slightly stunned for a while. After that, I chose a movie recommended by the ticket seller. It was a fantasy movie and quite interesting. Drinking sweet milk tea and enjoying the good plot, time passed quickly, and the bitterness in my heart seemed to be forgotten for a short while. I just realized that watching a movie alone could also be very pleasant. After the movie ended, I turned on my phone. There were several missed calls and unread messages, all from Ethan. Evelyn, I'm sorry. I just lost my temper and said things I didn't mean. But I didn't think like that. You know that I've always liked you. I swear that I only have a brother-sister relationship with Sophia. I promise that nothing happened between Sophia and me just now. I was sleeping too soundly and didn't notice. I apologize to you. In the future, I will keep a distance from all the opposite sex after drinking. Please don't be angry with me, okay? His tone was quite sincere, but I didn't feel anything in my heart. There was no other reason. There had been too many similar apologies and promises before. In the past, every time, I would be soft-hearted and would take the opportunity they gave to smooth things over. Now looking back, I just felt that everything was so dull. I could even imagine the scene at home now. Ethan was sitting on the sofa with a furrowed brow, calling me or sending me a message at intervals. Sophia was sitting aside, sobbing softly, apologizing for her carelessness. My mother-in-law was comforting Sophia while criticizing my behavior with disgust. In my mother-in-law's eyes, I had nowhere to go except their home, so I would definitely bow my head. This was her experience in controlling me countless times. But this time, I didn't want to be like that anymore. I turned on my phone. There was still a balance of 4,765 yuan in it. My father-in-law opened a company, so the family was quite wealthy. But the financial power had always been in my mother-in-law's hands. Every month, I had to ask my mother-in-law for the money for buying groceries and living expenses. I never had any extra money. This over 4,000 yuan was saved by me from doing part-time jobs from time to time without telling my family. I wasn't qualified for good jobs, and my mother-in-law thought that bad jobs were not presentable and would disgrace Ethan's family, let alone temporary jobs. I had saved this money with great difficulty. But now I was extremely grateful to myself at that time, which gave me a bit of courage to be out and about, so that I wouldn't end up on the streets. I searched online for a while and booked a small hotel with a relatively high cost-performance ratio. I planned to stay outside for a few days to calm down and think about what to do next. After I turned off my phone, Ethan didn't call again. It wasn't until evening that he sent another message. Evelyn, where are you? I'll come to pick you up. It's not safe for you to be outside alone at night. I knew that this was another opportunity he offered to make up. I should have been sensible and taken it, accepted Ethan's apology, gone back home, endured my mother-in-law's nagging, reintegrated into the family, and then started a new day, taking care of my son Julian, Ethan, my mother-in-law, and even serving Sophia, but I didn't want to. I didn't reply and lay on the bed in the hotel, aimlessly browsing web pages. I thought that I wouldn't be able to fall asleep in a strange place. Unexpectedly, while browsing, I didn't know when I lost consciousness. I woke up a little after 6 o'clock the next morning. Usually at this time, I would get up to make breakfast for Julian. Over time, I got used to waking up at this hour even without an alarm clock. It was a rare opportunity to go back to sleep, but unfortunately, I couldn't fall asleep. So I simply went for a stroll in the park near the hotel. The sun had just risen. Against the backdrop of the dew, the leaves were extraordinarily green and the flowers were especially bright. Even the old people doing morning exercises in the distance looked particularly elegant as they practiced Taiji. Everything seemed so beautiful that it involuntarily lifted one's spirits. Time passed slowly. I just realized that a day could be so long when I had nothing to do. Suddenly, I remembered that it seemed I hadn't paid attention to the details of life for a long time. The Evelyn who bravely escaped from home didn't know when she disappeared. Daily necessities had occupied my whole life. I was so tired that I didn't have the energy or the mood to observe these things. But when I escaped back then, I clearly had in mind that I wanted to strive to live a free life and not let anyone have the right to dominate me. But why did I end up changing myself beyond recognition in the end? No, no, no. It shouldn't be like this. Ethan called at noon. The ringtone was very urgent. When the call was connected, there was some noise on the other end. Ethan's voice was very cold. Julian has fallen ill. In an instant, I couldn't care about anything else. I hurriedly took a taxi to the hospital that Julian usually went to. All the way, I was filled with regret and self-blame in my heart. Julian was born prematurely and had a weak heart. Once he had an attack and didn't take medicine in time, it would be very dangerous. Fortunately, we visited an old Chinese doctor last time and got a very good prescription. He hadn't had an attack for half a year. I didn't expect that just 2 days after I left and didn't watch over him. I shouldn't have ignored Julian just because I was angry with Ethan. I rushed to the hospital in a hurry, asked the nurse about Julian's ward location, and didn't have time to wait for the elevator. I climbed up floor by floor along the stairs. When I finally arrived on the 5th floor, panting heavily, the elevator door happened to open. Ethan and Sophia were walking out, each holding one of Julian's hands. Wow, Julian really likes Aunt Sophia. I don't know what Sophia said, but Julian looked very happy and was even skipping a little while walking. The three of them were chatting and laughing. For a moment, they looked like a real family of three. Suddenly, I felt a bit timid about going forward. It wasn't until they entered the ward that I came to my senses and followed them, asking, "Is Julian okay?" The chatting and laughing in the ward stopped. Then came Julian's dissatisfied voice, "Mom, why did you just come? I felt so uncomfortable this morning. Why weren't you by my side? You don't care about me at all." "Sorry, Julian. Mom just found out that you were sick. There was a traffic jam on the way." Be good, Julian. Your mom definitely didn't mean it. She was probably delayed by something and couldn't be with you." Sophia rubbed Julian's head and coaxed him gently. "Forget it. It's okay, Mom. I'm fine with Aunt Sophia and Dad accompanying me." "Aunt Sophia, I want a rabbit-shaped apple." Julian shook Sophia's hand and whined softly. "Okay, Auntie will peel one for you." They seemed much closer than I was with Julian. Although I knew that this might be deliberately shown by Sophia, I still couldn't help feeling sad. How much of a failure had I been in these years? Even the child I had brought up with my own hands was closer to Sophia. Until Julian fell asleep, Ethan didn't say a word to me. I knew that he was angry about my ignoring and not responding to him yesterday. After all, this was the first time I had run away from home and the first time I hadn't replied to his messages for such a long time. In the past, no matter how angry or aggrieved I was, I would reply to his messages as soon as possible. But now, I couldn't be bothered to pay attention and just focused all my attention on Julian. As a result, Ethan's face became darker and darker. Later on, he even seemed a bit indifferent to Sophia's attempts to talk to him. "Brother Ethan, since Sister Evelyn is here to take care of Julian, I'll go back first. We were in a hurry when sending Julian here today and didn't drive. Could you give me a ride?" Sophia didn't leave until it was getting dark and then asked. Ethan glanced at me before answering. Seeing that I didn't react, he said grudgingly, "Of course. It's not safe for you to be alone at night." "Great. I knew you were the best, Brother Ethan." Sophia excitedly hugged Ethan. Ethan's body stiffened, but he didn't push her away after all. Until they left the ward together, all the time my eyes were fixed on Julian, who was playing snake on the bed, and I didn't look at them at all. Ethan was indeed Ethan. After 11 years of marriage, he knew what I cared about the most and deliberately hit me where it hurt. Fortunately, I had already decided not to care anymore. When a game ended, I took the mobile phone out of Julian's hand. "Okay, our time for playing with the mobile phone is up today. No, no. Just one more game, Mom. No way. If you play for too long, your eyes will become nearsighted and you'll need to wear thick glasses. You won't be able to see clearly without glasses. You're lying. Aunt Sophia said it was okay. Dad also let me play for a long time during the day. You're lying. I hate you. I was suddenly at a loss for words at that moment. My mouth opened and closed for a long time, but I didn't know what to say. My mind was also blank. After a long while, I heard myself asking in a hoarse voice, "Then who do you like better, Mom or Aunt Sophia?" Of course it's Aunt Sophia. She's so gentle. She never loses her temper with Dad and me. She can also cook a lot of delicious food. Every time she picks me up from school, my classmates are so envious. Oh, okay then. If Mom and Dad separated, would you want to stay with Dad or Mom? Of course with Dad. If you do something wrong, just apologize to Dad. He has worked hard to support you and me. Okay, go to bed early. I turned around with a hoarse voice, and the thought in my heart became completely firm at this moment. After Julian fell asleep, I sent Ethan a message and asked him to have a good talk tomorrow. The thought of divorce had crossed my mind several times, and now I finally made up my mind. A few days ago, I had been struggling with what to do about Julian if we got divorced. He wasn't in good health and needed someone to pay attention to him all the time. After the divorce, I wouldn't be able to let Julian live a good life. What's more, Ethan and my mother-in-law probably wouldn't allow me to take Julian away either, but if I left Julian behind after I divorced Ethan, he would surely marry Sophia. Could Julian live well on his own? However, Julian really seemed to like Sophia, and his affection and closeness to her were far greater than to me. Well, in this way, when I leave, I won't be so reluctant. When Ethan learned that I wanted a divorce, an incredulous expression appeared on his face. Evelyn, are you crazy? Do you know what you're talking about? Ethan, do you still remember our first child? I suddenly changed the topic and asked. His expression became a bit dazed all of a sudden. That child was already 6 months old. She would move around playfully in my belly. She was a very lively little girl. I named her Juju, the Juju of jewelry. But in the end, she didn't get to come into this world and take a look at her mom and dad. I'm sorry. We were first-time parents back then and had no experience. I shouldn't have left you alone at home. No, Sophia was the one who caused her death. I interrupted him. How can you say that again? Sophia was kind-hearted to help Mom mop the floor that day. She didn't know that the water stains hadn't been mopped up completely. I looked at the man who subconsciously defended Sophia again and smiled. Ethan, look, you care more about Sophia than that child. I'm not. I interrupted him. It doesn't matter. At first, like you, I also thought she didn't do it on purpose. But over the years, she has repeatedly damaged the relationship between you and me, making us drift apart. I don't believe she's really that innocent anymore. You don't have to defend her either. Whether it's right or wrong, I've decided to let you go and help you two get together. Wish you a happy marriage that lasts forever. My only request is that I hope you can treat our son well after you marry her. Evelyn, what do you mean? There's really nothing between Sophia and me. Why do you always make a fuss about this time and time again? We've been married for 11 years. I think I've never let you down. It's okay if you make a scene usually, but now you're even using divorce to threaten me? If that's the case, you're wrong. I won't. Ethan, I'm serious. I handed him the printed divorce agreement. I don't want your money either. You just need to take good care of Julian. If it's convenient for you, we can go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to apply for divorce now. If your ID card is here, you just need to go back and get the marriage certificate. Evelyn, are you serious? He looked up in disbelief. For the sake of divorce, you don't even want Julian? I don't have a penny to my name. Julian is in poor health. It's more suitable for him to be with you, his father. Besides, under Mom's influence, Julian has always liked Sophia, hasn't he? No. I don't agree. Evelyn, I know you're still angry about the incident that Sophia and I were lying on the bed together. I'll give you time to calm down. I have something to do and I'm leaving first. After realizing that I was serious, Ethan fled in a panic. Perhaps he still loved me. But after 10 years of wear and tear, I'm afraid he himself didn't understand how much of this feeling was love and how much was habit. The encounter between Ethan and me was somewhat romantic when you think about it. At that time, I had just escaped from home. I was born in a very remote rural area. My parents were the most patriarchal in the village. Since I was a child, I had to give in to my younger brother in everything. My parents said that I should be grateful to my younger brother. If he had been born first, I wouldn't have come into this world at all. Only when my younger brother didn't want the delicious food or fun toys could I get a little share. My younger brother didn't do well in school, so my parents spent money to buy him a place in school. I ranked first in my grade, but still didn't have money for school. If it hadn't been for my head teacher who came to our house again and again to say that the school would pay my tuition fees, I wouldn't even have been able to go to high school. But I could only study until I graduated from high school because it was time for me to get married. My younger brother fell in love with a girl at school. The girl's family wouldn't agree to the marriage unless we had a house. My parents had their eyes on my betrothal gifts. They would sell me to whoever offered the highest betrothal gifts. Then, like those uneducated girls in the village, I would live a muddled life for the rest of my life. That kind of life was too terrifying. For the first time in my life, I had the thought of rebelling. I kept half of the money I earned from working during the summer vacation, secretly took another 900 yuan, bought tickets, and made my way to Beijing, and started my life as a migrant worker in Beijing. Since I didn't have a high enough education, I started as the lowest level waitress. Fortunately, food and accommodation were provided. When I met Ethan, it was the second year after I came to Beijing. On the recommendation of my colleagues, I, who already had some experience, changed to work as a waitress in a larger chain hotel. While on duty, I accidentally picked up Ethan's handbag, which contained his study materials. He wanted to thank me and asked me what reward I wanted. I refused. It wasn't a big deal. I had encountered such situations several times before. The next time we met was when I was being harassed by a male guest, and he kindly helped me out of the trouble. The third time was at an amusement park. When I went to the amusement park for the first time at the age of 18, I was so excited that I didn't even notice I had lost my ID card. It was only when the staff made an announcement over the loudspeaker that I realized it. When I followed the signs to look for it, Ethan, who was holding a little child, came into my sight. What a coincidence! I can be said to have helped you this time too. Seeing that it was me, he waved my ID card in his hand and showed a bright smile. That smile touched my heart. The sunny young man in a white shirt was really hard not to fall for. I chewed on the word fate over and over again in my mind before I could pretend to be calm. But I knew the gap between him and me. He was a local in the capital city, had a car and a house, and was a college student, while I was nobody. We could only go this far. So when he created chance encounters again and again and said time and time again that he didn't care about those differences, I fell for him so completely. For the first time, he went against his parents' wishes. Even when he was cut off from the financial support by his family and driven out, he didn't compromise. He lived on campus and took the bus to see me every day. He set up street stalls with me in the night market after I got off work to earn tuition fees for the next semester. It was very hot in summer. He, who used to spend money freely before, was reluctant to buy an extra ice cream. The only one was given to me. His clothes were soaked with sweat, and his face was flushed with heat, but he still smiled at me happily. After a 6-month standoff, he happily told me that his family finally agreed to let us be together. That night, he happily hugged me and kept saying, "From now on, you also have a real home." At that time, we were really happy. At that time, neither of us knew that the relationship we had fought so hard for would be destroyed by ourselves 10 years later. In the following few days, until Julian was discharged from the hospital, Ethan deliberately avoided me. When sending Julian home, my mother-in-law happened to be at home. When she saw me, she enthusiastically greeted me for the first time. "I heard that you're going to divorce our Ethan? When do you plan to go through the procedures? I've always said that you two aren't a good match. The gap between you and Ethan is too big. He and Sophia are childhood sweethearts and are the most suitable for each other." This was a rare friendly face from my mother-in-law since we got married, but it was only because I was getting divorced. Fortunately, I didn't care that much anymore. Any time is okay as long as it's convenient for Ethan. I just hope you'll take good care of Julian in the future. Don't worry about that. Julian is my grandson after all. After saying that, she waved her hand and urged, "Okay, Sophia will be here for dinner soon. You'd better leave quickly." When I was leaving, I happened to run into Ethan and Sophia coming together. So were they already starting to openly come and go together now? Seeing me, Ethan subconsciously distanced himself from Sophia a bit and then excitedly walked towards me. "Evelyn, you're back. Mom invited Sophia to have dinner at home today." "Yes, Sister Evelyn, why don't you stay for dinner together today?" Sophia said in a coquettish voice, clearly sounding like a hostess. "No, thanks. I just sent Julian home. I still have things to do, so I'll leave first. Let me know when it's convenient for you. I'll wait for you at the Civil Affairs Bureau." After saying that, I ignored the two of them and turned around to leave directly. Knowing clearly that all our conflicts were caused by Sophia, yet still unwilling to keep a distance from her. In that case, why bother to pretend to be affectionate? With the utmost efforts of my former mother-in-law, Ethan quickly agreed to the divorce. The process of getting the divorce certificate was surprisingly smooth. Ethan hesitated several times as if he wanted to say something, but I pretended not to see it. When I was leaving, Ethan couldn't help but stop me. "Evelyn, I'll wait for you. I still like you. If you regret it, come back to me. This will always be your home." I paused for a moment, but didn't turn around and continued walking forward. So he also knew that I had long lost my home. So was this one of the reasons why he was so unscrupulous? Ethan's family was his home, but it had never been mine. In Ethan's family, I was more like a guest who could be treated casually. They could be polite and courteous to anyone except me, but they only looked down on me, the one who seduced their son to be disobedient. They could look through my mobile phone and my bag without asking for my permission. When I made a phone call, my mother-in-law would monitor it. I had no privacy at all. What was left for me was only indifference and sarcasm. I carefully tried to please everyone. Except for Ethan, I had no one to rely on. But later I found out that even Ethan himself actually looked down on me in his heart. He attended various banquets but seldom took me with him. I was always left at home to take care of the children. Outsiders only knew that Ethan had a wife but had never seen me. I had never integrated into Ethan's circle of friends. For the sake of Ethan's exclusive preference for me, I once deceived myself and pretended not to see these things. However, they had always existed. And the preference that made me fall for him gradually dissipated over the years until there was hardly anything left. So I also lost the reason to keep persisting. Our beginning had already doomed the ending of separation. Before I decided to leave Beijing, I went to Ethan's family's place, planning to see Julian. However, to my surprise, my mother-in-law said that he didn't want to see me. Through the door, I could hear the laughter of him playing with Sophia inside. It seemed that nothing had changed just because I left. After confirming that he was happy, I ignored the bitterness in my heart and turned around to leave. That was okay too. It was time for me to live my own life. I returned to Nanchur. Instead of contacting my parents whom I hadn't seen for a long time, I rented an apartment in the urban area and found a job as a salesperson in a clothing store. When the clothing store wasn't busy, I would huddle in a corner and read books on clothing design. Since I was a child, I had been interested in clothing matching and always fantasized that I could design unique clothes by myself. When I was in high school, I thought that if I could go to college, I would definitely apply for the major of clothing design. Unfortunately, it finally didn't work out. Now, without any concerns, I had time to do these things. After saving some money, I was admitted to the clothing design major of a part-time university and used my free time to learn relevant knowledge. Every morning when I opened my eyes, I knew clearly what I should do that day. There was a special sense of satisfaction in my heart. I wouldn't be as confused and depressed as before. Although it was a bit hard, it was fulfilling. Working, making money, and going to school, I lived the life I had been looking forward to before. Except for the fixed 2 phone calls to Julian every month, I seldom thought about the past or Ethan anymore. The person who used to be as important as life in my heart gradually faded away in my life like this. It turned out that no one was indispensable to anyone. It turned out that I could live a better life without Ethan. When I received Ethan's call again, it was half a year later. On the phone, he told me guiltily that Julian had been admitted to the intensive care unit. The doctor said that his condition was very dangerous and hoped that I could come to see Julian. It was urgent, so I bought the nearest flight ticket as quickly as possible and flew to Beijing. When I arrived, my former mother-in-law was also there. She was unusually kind, poured me water, and brought me fruits, and asked me to go to rest early after seeing Julian. She would stay here to keep watch at night. However, I felt something was wrong. My former mother-in-law, Grace, didn't seem to want me to stay here to watch over Julian. Also, Ethan's strange attitude on the phone, everything told me that Julian's admission to the intensive care unit this time might not be an accident. I pressed Ethan for answers. He stammered and told me that when he got home that day, he happened to see Sophia covering Julian's mouth. Sophia said she was playing games with Julian at that time and was so careless that she didn't notice Julian wasn't feeling well. When I found out, Julian couldn't open his eyes anymore. I hurriedly sent him to the hospital. I'm sorry. I didn't take good care of him. I clenched my fists tightly, and my fingernails dug into my palms before I could barely calm myself down a bit. So, you didn't do anything to Sophia, did you? Julian has been in the intensive care unit since yesterday until now. I didn't have time. Ethan, Sophia is trying to kill. She's trying to kill. I roared and my voice was choked with sobs. Julian is also your son. He's the son we've raised since he was a baby. Are you going to abandon Julian for Sophia too? I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Ethan, if anything happens to Julian, I'll make Sophia's whole family pay with their lives. I turned my back on him and ignored him, then turned to stay outside the ward. No matter what my former mother-in-law Grace said, I wouldn't leave the ward for a single step. When I needed to use the toilet, I went to the public toilet opposite the ward. When I needed to buy food, I paid someone to help me. I didn't trust any of them anymore. Obviously, my former mother-in-law also knew everything, but she tried to help the murderer Sophia hide the truth. In her eyes, the wealthy and powerful Sophia was more important than her grandson Julian. 2 days later, Julian finally woke up. When he saw me, he hugged me and burst into tears. Mom, Aunt Sophia was trying to kill me. She was trying to kill me. Whoa. I said my heart hurt, but she didn't get me my medicine. She even covered my mouth with a pillow and said it would be better if I died. She said it was all because of me that Dad didn't want to be with her. She said that if I died, Dad would notice her. Whoa. I also heard Grandma say that she didn't want me anymore and that you should take me away. Let Aunt Sophia and Dad have another healthy baby. Grandma didn't care when I was sick either. Mom, I miss you so much. Take me away. In this family, only you really care about me. They don't want me, and I don't want Dad or Grandma either. Julian, what nonsense are you talking about? Your Aunt Sophia was clearly just too involved in playing games with you and didn't notice you weren't feeling well. How can you say she did it on purpose? You're being too naughty. My former mother-in-law rushed over and heard Julian's words. Her face instantly turned gloomy. Julian immediately shrank back reflexively. At that moment, my heart ached densely. What kind of life had the lively and cheerful Julian lived in the past 6 months that he would have a conditioned reflex of fear towards his own grandmother? I shouldn't have ignored him just because he said he was doing well on the phone. Didn't you hear what Julian said? I looked at Grace and repeated coldly, Sophia took Julian's medicine away when he had an attack and covered his mouth with a pillow. Joking? Is she joking with Julian's life? You. Anyway, Sophia didn't do it on purpose. Since you think we didn't take good care of him, then you can take Julian away from now on. Sophia is magnanimous and is willing to give you 1 million yuan. This money is enough for you to take Julian to live a good life in a small county. So, is this 1 million yuan a bribe to buy me off so that I won't pursue her crime of attack?